That is what Barack and I think about every day as we try to guide and protect our girls through the challenges of this unusual life in the spotlight. How we urge them to ignore those who question their father's citizenship or faith. How we insist that the hateful language they hear from public figures on TV does not represent the true spirit of this country. How we explain that when someone is cruel or acts like a bully, you don't stoop to their level. No, our motto is, when they go low, we go high.
I don't consider myself, and I don't believe I have ever been considered to be a part of the Dirtbag Left. But I'm certainly a little dirtbag adjacent. I've been known to be a little grimy. I don't pretend to be one of the thoughtful, civil, coastal elite style leftists or one of the Tumblr-educated, cozy core, too-online leftists. I'm kind of mean, partial to shitposting, and have even indulged in the odd politically incorrect joke or two. Oh no, I sound like a British comedian about to do some weak stand-up. What I'm trying to say is I get the appeal of edgy humor with a political bent. I get the appeal of cyberbullying public figures who have expressed views antithetical to my political aims. I literally have a podcast that's mostly dedicated to mocking people who are too dead to fight back. I had an account permabanned from Twitter for allegedly sending death threats to Matt Walsh and Tim Pool and Chaya Raichik. When they go low, I go to hell. But I think that there are some valid criticisms of crudeness and incivility as politic. And I think that largely that tactic is overplayed and has run its course. Hello, I'm Hoots. This is my channel. And today I want to talk about the politics of vulgarity.
Okay, so first of all, let's list every slur in the English lexicon. Listen, I am a slur anarchist. I don't really care.
Holy shit, you are such a little tender queer.
I don't really want to do this. You people have like worms in your brain, honestly.
I mean, you're the one who can't answer the question.
The dirtbag left is a term coined by Amber Ali Frost to describe a political style that eschews civility and embraces vulgarity, popularized by a conglomeration of mostly left-leaning New York City podcasters in the mid-2010s. That's a lot of words just to say Chapo Trap House. Basically, in the mid-2010s, there was definitely a frustration that was beginning to be felt amongst younger progressives with the way that a lot of establishment Democrats and conservatives reacted to then presidential candidate Donald J. Trump. There was this horror and disgust at his lack of decorum, his rudeness, his incivility, and that's all fine and good, but liberals were falling over themselves to congratulate Trump's conservative primary election rivals, whose ideological positions were virtually indistinguishable from Trump's. They just had better speechwriters and tailors, and arguably, that was their downfall. But I'm not really here to relitigate the 2016 election. It was kind of disgusting to see so many centrist libs championing the aesthetics of politeness and fairness over ideological substance. Sure, it's fucking embarrassing that now and forever I'll live in a country that had a reality star for a president, but the problem with Trump isn't that he's a rude boy. It's that he's a reactionary demagogue whose politics consist of fucking over everyone except his close circle of friends. Like every other Republican. And the vast majority of Democrats. He just acted like less of a dweeb while doing it. His crude candor and third-grade vocabulary made him a clown, but it also made him popular. I've never known a person that could be both intentionally and unintentionally funny with such consistency. People related to him, even if they didn't like him. And a lot of the left took notice. Vulgarity could be strategy. In an article for Current Affairs from 2016 titled The Necessity of Political Vulgarity, Amber Ali Frost defends vulgarity and japery as crucial rhetorical weapons that have long been used in the intellectual battles of our revolutionary history.
Vulgarity has always been employed in revolutionary rhetoric, perhaps most notably in the propaganda leading up to the French Revolution. The pamphleteers of France were all too happy to satirize and smear the upper class with the utmost malice. Clergy, royals, and anyone else in power were slandered and depicted visually in all manner of crass and farcical political cartoons. Of all the public figures subjected to such vicious derision and gossip, often highly inaccurate gossip at that, Marie Antoinette was singled out for especially inventive and vicious taunting. True to French tradition, the slanderous pamphlets, called libelles, were fond of wordplay. For the Austrian-born Antoinette, they coined Austrichienne, meaning Austrian bitch, but also resembling the French word for ostrich. Thus, layering a visual pun upon a verbal one artist actually portrayed Antoinette stroking a massive ostrich-like penis, complete with legs and a saddle. There are arguments to be made over who constitutes a valid target, but when crude obscenity is directed at figures of power, their prestige can be tarnished, even in the eyes of the most reverent of subjects. Caricature is designed to exaggerate, and therefore make more noticeable, people's central defining qualities, and can thus be illuminating even at its most indelicate.
In her essay, Frost cites a political tradition of vulgarity that unites the French revolutionaries, Vietnam War protesters, the 1988 NWA track Fuck the Police, and the outrageous speeches of Donald J. Trump.
The depravity of the atrocious acts committed by the powerful far exceed the depravity of any swear words one could use to describe those acts. The death and brutality of Vietnam didn't just deserve an F-word or two, but warranted every last curse that could be spoken by the human tongue. And as the 18th century French knew, monarchy is the real barbarity. It was the libellistes who were the true allies of the Enlightenment.
There's something almost John Waters about this that really appeals to me. Embracing vulgarity and filth, holding it up as a foil to the real trash, the injustice of systems that cloak their corruption and dereliction in politeness and civility. Épater la bourgeoisie, as 19th century decadents would say. Shock the middle classes. But if you're like me, the Marie Antoinette example Frost focuses so heavily on in her essay may have raised a few questions. A Vietnam War protester wearing a jacket that says "fuck the draft" and Donald Trump calling for an outright Muslim ban instead of the obfuscating euphemisms preferred by other members of his party are improprieties that are still clear and direct political statements. Marie Antoinette stroking a massive penis shaped like an ostrich is less so. This is just misogyny, right? Someone realized that the words Austrian bitch sounded kind of like ostrich, and also wanted to draw sexually explicit caricatures of Marie Antoinette. Satire requires clarity of purpose, and what are we trying to say here? That Marie Antoinette likes to ride big, thick cocks? Why are you making her sound so cool and relatable? She's just like me, for real, for real. Now, many people on the left, particularly those sympathetic to dirtbiggest tactics, will claim that appealing to the misogynists and perverts who just wanted to call Marie Antoinette a bitch and see her stroking some dicks pushed said perverts over to the anti-monarchist cause. Come for the women-hating, stay for the politics, so to speak. And likely that was the case for some of the libellists and their readers. But some were definitely just there for the woman-hating, right? Now, you may be thinking that from a tactical perspective, it doesn't really matter what someone's motivations are as long as they throw their support behind the just cause. And that is where my opinions diverge from those of my fellow scumbag socialists. I think it's fun to make fun of bad people. But I think when we're trying to wield mockery as a political weapon, it's at its sharpest and most deadly when we wield it in a way that centers our ideological goals. Otherwise, we run the risk of making our enemies look cool or funny, of giving them just cause to claim that they're being victimized. Or even worse, we run the risk of shocking the middle classes becoming our primary objective. Scandalizing and challenging the woke orthodoxy that dominates leftist spaces becomes the priority over any previously held political goals. And in the very worst cases, irony gives way to bleak nihilism, and the desire to push back against politeness and civility transforms progressives into reactionaries.
Hi, are you a fan of Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, I am.
What do you like about him?
That he's a socialist.
Why is socialism good?
Are you like, I don't really want to do this. What is this for?
We're asking people why they like Bernie Sanders.
For InfoWars?
Yes, we are InfoWars.
I think he has a lot of integrity. I like his value system. I like what he stands for.
Exactly what values?
Eating the rich.
Eating the rich. Well, are you aware that Bernie Sanders lives in $3 million homes?
No, I was not aware of that.
Yeah. And are you aware? I'm going to ask you something. So if they're about eating the rich, why do you think so many of the 1% support socialism?
Is that true?
It's very true.
Like who?
Well, for example, you know Venezuela, right?
Heard of it.
A majority of the country is currently eating rats, while their politicians are drinking champagne on a daily basis.
but that's not the 1%.
The 1% of Venezuela.
I'm talking about America.
Well, I'm saying, since if Bernie Sanders were president, right, and he wanted to bring the same ideas as for socialism into this country, do you think that we would benefit?
Yeah.
But I just told you Venezuela's eating rats.
But I just want people to have health care, honey. I don't want, like...
Well...
Oh my god. You people have, like, worms in your brain, honestly.
I can't believe I'm talking about this on my YouTube channel. Okay, so for the blessedly unaware, that InfoWars video is from the South by Southwest Film Festival in March of 2018. The woman in the sailor outfit is Dasha Nekrasova, an indie actress who was promoting a film at South by Southwest. Bernie Sanders was slated to give a speech at the festival, so InfoWars sent reporter Ashton Whitty to find Bernie supporters to dunk on. It did not go well for Ashton Whitty, and the video went semi-viral, earning Dasha the nickname Sailor Socialism, and InfoWars ended up deleting the video. But Dasha uploaded it to her Twitter and Instagram accounts, and this is where it went seriously viral, scoring her interviews with Teen Vogue and Vice, and a featured segment on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Dasha uploaded the first episode of her podcast, Red Scare, with her co-host art critic Anna Kachin 19 days after the original InfoWars video was uploaded, and Dasha tagged the podcast in the replies to her re-uploads. So the podcast grew big and grew fast. The show has boasted celebrity listeners like Chloe Sevigny, Elizabeth Olsen, and Lena Dunham, and guests like Slavoj Žižek, Angela Nagel, Tulsi Gabbard, and John Waters. Red Scare was one of the seminal Dirtbag Left podcasts. It was initially unabashedly socialist, unabashedly class reductionist, and unabashedly anti-woke. Anna and Dasha were and still are highly critical of the liberal white feminism that still dominates mainstream feminism, and of identity politics, which they view through a narrow Marxist lens as a bourgeois distraction from class consciousness and meaningful political change. They're also a pair of incredibly funny, overprivileged New York City mean girls. They're shitposters. Their vibe is best typified by a scandal over some of their old podcast merch. These are some shirts based on the ISIS flag, but if you zoom in, some of the calligraphy looks like the sexy women on the mud flaps of trucks, and the center text says Red Scare. It is provocative without actually saying anything, seemingly designed to trigger both the political right and the left, and something that you can only get away with if you're a skinny upper middle class white lady, and I want one so bad! I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm kidding. And that was the initial appeal of Red Scare, as a safe space for urban, overeducated, middle-class white girls subsisting on precarity wages to explore a little transgressive comedy and express our frustrations about the center-right party that's meant to represent the left wing in this godforsaken country. Everything they say is cloaked in so many layers of irony that it's kind of difficult to parse what their actual opinions are, which is very funny for the first 10 minutes of your hour-long podcast. But the shtick quickly becomes fatiguing and sad. Because Anna and Dasha have positioned themselves in opposition to the liberal mainstream, they've mostly committed themselves to commenting on the same culture war nonsense and celebrity gossip that pads out segments on Fox News. They have become the reactionary wing of the nominal left. And while they still signal support for liberal wedge issues like abortion, their politics have drifted more toward the new right. They've promoted vaccine misinformation and sedevacantist Catholicism. They hosted Alex Jones as a guest in November 2021 in a bid to rehabilitate his image after he was court-ordered to pay the families of Sandy Hook victims $1.5 billion in damages. They shitposted themselves full circle. They became so irony-poisoned that they became that which they initially opposed. InfoWars for her. In a review of Red Scare for podcastreview.org, Sylvia McNamara writes,
I'm all for vulgarity that reveals vulgar truth. We should mock and demean our political puppeteers and their dupes if it bolsters progressive politics. I think it's fine, at least sometimes, to oppose the ineffectual piousness of mainstream liberalism not through measured critique, but by modeling a rhetorical alternative. But Red Scare's transgressions obscure more than they reveal. Between petty violations of political correctness, the gayest, most R-worded thing ever is a metal concert with seats, ironically taking positions so aggressive as to be absurd, maybe I should date an abusive man so I can get motivated to be thin, and misrepresenting basic facts, claiming that the Mueller investigation already cleared Trump of wrongdoing. The show collapses into meaningless offense, meant only to spit in the eye of anyone still foolish enough to care.
Recently, Anna and Dasha seem to have even abandoned their myopic brand of class consciousness for something more like political nihilism. They've descended so far down the shitposter rabbit hole that they've completely politically disengaged. To sincerely care about anything is cringe, so they embrace a kind of politics of spite and insincerity. To me, Red Scare represents an extreme case of a pretty common disease on the shitposting left, when the dirtbag typology is centered rather than the leftist. When the desire to shock and provoke and trigger is prioritized over, having good politics, there's a disturbing regressive trend among nominally progressive online personalities. I'm thinking of edgy leftists like Vosh, who somehow always find a way to use their platforms to harass marginalized people. Like when he misunderstood Black nationalism and sent his thousands of followers to harass a much smaller creator and call her a white genocide enjoyer or whatever. Or when he used J.K. Rowling's trans misogyny as an excuse to promote just general misogyny, I guess. Women be quieter and start apologizing more. That is such a wild take, Ian. Have you met women? I apologized to my couch when I stubbed my toe on it. I'm thinking of Keffels, who apparently grew tired of ratioing transphobes and decided instead to use her platform to harass feminist Asian writer Rosalind Toulousan for 2 entire years. Noodles are tasty has become a rallying cry similar to ethics in video game journalism, an alibi for a harassment campaign that has become a meme unto itself. This isn't activism. This is just a racist waste of time, which, to be fair, is a pretty accurate description of Clara's body of work. But this kind of boring reactionary trolling is not worthy of anyone's time or attention, and certainly not anyone who claims to be aligned with the left. If you're someone who consistently uses your platform to torment marginalized people, I don't really think you're doing leftism, no matter how much you want universal health care and a livable minimum wage. But I've noticed that a lot of people who see themselves as politically incorrect leftists fall into this trap. Saying something outrageous or feuding with someone that your average anime avatar anon thinks is cringe gets you a lot of attention. And we all love attention. But if you aren't careful, vulgarity can sour and become cruelty, and the political weapon of crudeness becomes a blunted cudgel wielded even against our allies. Now, anti-identitarian leftists will say that pandering to marginalized groups is weakening the left, that the woke scolds are off-putting to the white working class who would be on board with our project were it not for all these uppity insert marginalized identity here's. But I'm the white working class. And sure, maybe now I live in a major city that skews more liberal and that has influenced my worldview, but I grew up in Florida, in a county named after a Civil War general that votes overwhelmingly Republican every single election season. I've never set foot in a gender studies classroom. I mean, I've never set foot in a coal mine either, but I think that by most anti-identitarian metrics, I should be fairly representative of this imagined white working class. And yet, my politics have drifted further and further to the left over the years. But that isn't because of a bunch of streamers and podcasters stealthing class consciousness into my brain via a giant slur Trojan horse. It's because of people of color, disabled people, queer people I've interacted with throughout the years who have honestly and openly discussed their experiences. It's because I've come to the obvious conclusion that our political struggles are intertwined. And I don't think I'm the exception to the rule here. I think empathy is the default condition of humankind. That's why movies be so good. I'm not exceptionally intelligent or exceptionally easily persuaded. Okay, well, maybe I'm a little easily persuaded, but so are most people. That's why advertisements be so good. Also, a massive percentage of the working class are women of color. So even if you are a class reductionist, alienating those demographics is just strategically not good. I think any political strategy that encourages you to abandon empathy for your allies is a misguided strategy at best and actively damaging your cause at worst. As Thought Slime points out in their video on a similar topic, the left doesn't really mean anything.
You'll hear the term used to describe everything from hardcore anarchist revolutionaries to neoliberal ghouls who at least don't actively seem to want to feed gay people into a wood chipper right now.
It's just an umbrella term that means anyone who isn't the right. And if we need to abandon some of our political ideals, some of our comrades, in order for the left to win, then the left is a failed project. I really do want to build a better world. I want that more than anything. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but things kind of suck right now for almost everyone. And I don't think most of it has to be this way. But I can't always be the change I want to see in the world because, well, first of all, I'm just one little hoot. But also because I have this real mean streak that I've come to recognize within myself. And I think that if I'm going to use my platform as any kind of a force for good, I'm going to need to address the dirtbag within. We were never meant to experience everyone's innermost thoughts at all hours of the day. And we especially weren't meant to experience everyone's thoughts being boosted and shaped by this bizarre attention economy that rewards the wildest, most contrarian takes. We're all on the same page here, right? Social media is ruining our brains. I don't know if it's creating more annoying people or just giving the annoying people more exposure, but either way, I hate it. There are a lot of annoying people in the world, and a lot of them are on the left. I'll even allow you that most of them are on the left, because the progressive left, with all its high-minded ideas of fairness and equity, tends to be more welcoming of annoying people. When I really sit with myself and interrogate what I'm moved by, what I want, my feelings are very clear. I want to build a better world for everyone. Even the people I find really fucking annoying. But I'm also an entertainer at heart, and I like being funny, and I especially like taking low-hanging fruit because entertainers are, at our very cores, incredibly fucking lazy. So I often find myself getting ready to quote tweet some marginalized person who's become the main character of Twitter for some outrageous take, chuck my little chihuahua on that particular dog pile. And I end up having to stop myself because my instincts are antithetical to my goals. I want the world to be better for everyone, and sometimes I catch myself in the act of trying to make someone's world a tiny bit worse. Now, I don't give a shit about politicians and public figures who are actively working against the common good. We should be making their lives a tiny bit worse if it's in the service of a just cause. So if the mean girls of the left are bullying Kristen Sinema at brunch or tweeting at Ben Shapiro about his wife's bone-dry pussy, then more power to them. But when the instinct is to turn the spotlight of your ire on random nobodies, I've developed a handy intervention strategy. Keep it in the group chat. KIITGC. Okay, well, the acronym could use some workshopping. Sometimes people are annoying. And sometimes you want to vent about how annoying they're being. Luckily, we have 2 different tools at our disposal for just such a situation. The first is friends. Now, some people may be running down to my comment section right now to be like, no, I don't have any friends, but I guarantee you do. I guarantee you have at least one friend. And if you don't, you probably have someone in your life that thinks they're your friend, and you should probably try reciprocating at least for a month. Just try it out. The second tool is a group chat, which is when a group of friends decides they want a private little place to send each other messages, usually via text, on a service like WhatsApp, or if you're old or hate yourself, Facebook Messenger. A wonderful thing about group chats is that they're private and usually filled with people who know you personally, so in a sense, they're kind of a safe space. So when someone tweets out something like, I'm an asexual slut who likes to and you think that's silly, instead of dunking on that person in a public forum, you can gently mock it in private. Maybe one of your friends in the group chat will even push back on your stance based on their experience or the experiences of others and give you a new perspective on asexual sluts. I've certainly had my mind changed about things in group chats more than once, and I don't think that would have been possible had the same conversation been hashed out on a public platform with people I didn't know or trust. Hell, even when the group chat has broadly agreed with me and has indulged in a little private contempt, I think we're all entitled to a few mean-spirited jokes in the privacy of our own homes, as long as those jokes aren't permitted to spill over into the public sphere. where they can hurt other people. Leftists don't need to repent for impurity of spirit. We aren't Calvinists or whatever. I assume that's what Calvinism is. I honestly don't know. I've never been inside a church. What's it like? I've heard there's free wine there. Church enjoyers, please leave a comment below. I keep coming back to this idea of centering the leftist over the dirtbag. In shit posters whose mockery devolves into hollow cruelty, I see something of myself reflected back, and I don't like it. I'm even trying to make an effort to be better about mocking people's appearances when I'm talking about genuinely bad people. You know, Gwen Shamblin won't hear you mocking her withered hand, but your friends who have never used hand lotion will. Whether I like it or not, I am a person with a public platform, and I need to use it responsibly, or I might seriously hurt someone. And I don't want to do that. I think the part of me that is mean and sardonic is probably never going to be fully excised, but she can be pruned and tamed. Like the red rose grasped within the fist, I don't need to prick the hand of solidarity. Is there anything more exhausting than a leftist media critic in 2023? Part 4, why listening to Joe Rogan is like being an accomplice to murder. Whatever happened to just let people enjoy things? I think it's mostly fine to enjoy things, even things that are a little problematic. I made a whole video interrogating my feelings about that. I'm really proud of it. You should check it out. If you have a soft spot for Chapo Trap House, this essay was not intended to dissuade you from listening. They have excellent guests on, and they produce limited series on what I consider to be important topics. Hell, even if you listen to Red Scare, I'm never going to scold anyone for listening to some Mean Girls with vocal fry. That's my core demo. Actually, if you're a Red Scare fan, sound off in the comments. I'd be really interested to know what proportion of Nosbols are into Frozen 2. Amber Lee Frost has a memoir aptly titled Dirtbag coming out the same week this video comes out. Wonder what that's about. I still plan on reading it, but I stumbled upon an early review of it from a fan who was disappointed with the book's dated and parochial politics.
The book even reprints Frost's entire 2019 article denouncing Warren in favor of Bernie, a topic nobody needs relitigated. To the extent that the book is a history, it's fair for Frost to recount the main political opponents of the left during the Bernie campaign, though she might have included the alt-right too if this was really her intention. But we're living in 2023 and know the aftermath of the Bernie campaign beyond its defeat. Why not consider that? However, the book, save a few proleptic mentions of COVID, quite literally ends with Bernie's defeat in 2020. Frost has the good sense not to write an apologia for Bernie's failure, a left-wing equivalent of Clinton's What Happened. But the book does conclude on a resigned note. Frost sees no immediate path forward for the socialist left, and recommends readers try to recover their energy, disconnect from the media, read novels, and keep vigilant and faithful. In another parlance, she could have recommended that readers practice self-care and go to brunch. The supreme irony of the book is that for as much as Frost loathes the progressive libs, she takes what were once the insults she and her ilk lobbed at them and offers them sincerely to her readers.
This bitter, cynical millennial shtick is getting old, and it's only in service of the status quo. I'd like to offer up some alternatives, so if you're looking for content that isn't made by disgruntled 40-year-olds who stan octogenarian career politicians, this section is for you. If you're looking for creators who have shitposter energy but have managed to not become totally irony poisoned, I'd recommend the YouTube channels Thought Slime, Mune Cat, and my friends Ponderful and John the Duncan. For podcasts, I think I'd have to recommend my own shitpost of a podcast, Respect the Dead, as well as anything by Jamie Loftus. She's got a number of limited podcast series, which are all amazing, and she's just very funny. She's also been a guest on The Daily Zeitgeist several times, which I'd recommend if you're looking for a comedy podcast that covers current events. I haven't listened in several years, though, so don't cancel me if it sucks now. One Dime is another current events / leftists philosophy type podcast that my friend Neil Farrell just turned me on to. If you're looking for creators who are the antithesis of the Dirtbag Left, you're in luck, because Sincerity is back in a big way, baby. Fuck the cynics! Let's get in touch with our momos. Babilla and Turb are a couple of YouTubers who are sweet and sincere and also very funny. And my friends over at The Leftist Cooks are really bringing back emotionality in a big way. I don't really watch streamers. That's not the way I prefer to consume content. So there's like a big gap in my streamer knowledge. But if you're looking for left-leaning political and current event streamers, I have to recommend Kira Chats, Lumiru, and Lucid Fox. All very good, kind people. This is nowhere near an exhaustive list, so please put your recommendations in the comments. Also, feel free to connect with people in the comment section. Connect with them on Discord forums and under Twitter threads. Make friends. Make allies. Make group chats. Find people to meet up with at marches and in socialist bookstores. Reject the impulse to simply consume content and retreat into your tailor-made niche of politainment. Reject the impulse to let the algorithm serve you up a healthy serving of complacency. I think action begins with community, so find community. Build friendships. When cynicism and bitterness and nihilism are threatening to take over, these are the things that are going to keep you fighting. Not some dumb bitch on YouTube. To paraphrase some comments that I get in my comments section, stay mad, commies.